Honorable Sir Marston Gibson, Chief Justice of Barbados, Lieutenant Colonel the Honorable Jeffrey Bostick, Minister of Health and Wellness, Honorable Ms. Cynthia Ford, Minister of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, Professor Abdullah Hakim Quick and Mrs. Quick, distinguished members of the legal profession, distinguished members of the clergy, distinguished historians and academics, Maulana Ibrahim Bana, head of the Barbados Association of Muslim Theologians and principal of the Al-Falah School, Dr. Abdul Muhammad, president of the Barbados Muslim Association, founder and president of and members of the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies, distinguished imams and representatives of the Mosque of Barbados, president and members of ISOC, Islamic Society of Cave Hill Campus, distinguished members and representatives of the media and other social media organizations that are here, distinguished brothers and sisters in humanity, and those who are joining us on the World Wide Web. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, blessings, mercy, and guidance of Almighty God be with us here this evening. On behalf of our esteemed author and researcher, Sabir Nakuda, his wife, daughters, granddaughters, and extended family, I thank you all for accepting this invitation to be here this evening to be part of the launch of his second book, Muslims of Caricom. Thank you very much. To initiate this evening's launch, I would like to invite a young man, Mr. Asif Patel, to recite a few verses of the Holy Quran in Arabic, and Ms. Hania Bulbulia to read the translation of those verses in English. Mr. Patel is a student of the Cave Hill campus in the Faculty of Sport and is the Islamic Advisor and Public Relations Officer of the Islamic Society of Cave Hill campus, better known as ISOC. He has memorized the entire Quran from cover to cover in Arabic and carries the honorable title of Hafiz, meaning a memorizer. Hania Bulbulia is a fourth-form student of the St. Michael's School and has the honor of being my daughter. Asif.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم صدق الله العظيم.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. O you who have attained to faith, remain conscious of God, and let every soul look to what He sends for tomorrow. And remain conscious of God, for God is fully aware of all that you do. And be not like those who are forgetful of God, and so He made them forgetful of themselves. They are the wicked ones. Not equal are the inhabitants of the fire and the inhabitants of paradise. The inhabitants of paradise are the successful ones. Had we revealed this Quran upon a mountain, you would have indeed seen it humbling itself and breaking apart out of the fear of Allah. We set forth such parables to people that they may reflect. He is Allah. There is no God but He, the knower of the unseen and the manifest. He is the most merciful, the most compassionate. He is Allah. There is no God but He, the King, the Holy, the All-Peace, the Giver of Security, the Overseer, the Most Mighty, the Overpowering, the All-Great. Exalted be He from whatever they associate with Him. He is God, the Creator, the Maker who shapes all forms and appearances. His are the most beautiful names. All that is in the heavens and the earth glorifies Him, and He is the mighty and the wise. Almighty God's word is the truth.
Many thanks to Hafiz Asif Patel for his beautiful recitation of the Holy Quran, his verses, and for Hania for reading the translation. We take an opportunity at this time to welcome Minister of Labour, Colin Jordan, welcome, and Minister in the Minister of Foreign Trade, Mrs. Sandra Husband, and her husband. She's here. And also, His Excellency Ambassador David Comison. Welcome. The verses that was just read is incidentally from a chapter in the Quran, chapter 59. Some translate that chapter, the Arabic name of that chapter, to the gathering. It's unique because we are in the year of regathering in Barbados. We gather in 2020. Sabir chose the right time to launch his book. And you're here to witness that launch. For those that may not know me, I'm Suleiman Bubulia, and Sabir has asked me to be your anchor this evening, or your guide, or your MC, or whatever you wish to call it. I've known Sabir for over 30 years, and despite the fact that Sabir is 20 years my senior, we have maintained a very close bond of friendship over those 3 decades. He gave me the task of managing his first book, Bengal to Barbados, which he launched 7 years ago in 2013, and which has sold over 1,000 copies to date. And he has given me, again, the opportunity of managing his second book, which we launched tonight. Unfortunately, despite repeated protests and requests and demands, I've received no payment for my duties. So I have purposely invited the Minister of Labour here to complain to him. And hopefully I'll get some redress. We welcome to the launch tonight the Honourable Ms. Mia Moore-Motley, Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, Minister of National Security and the Civil Service, and the current Chair of Caricom. Welcome, Mr. Prime Minister. You came at the exact time we were doing the welcome address, and that's being delivered by the ISOC President, the Islamic Society of KFIL President, Mr. Tahir Bubulia, and he will do the welcome address to you.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening once again. The Honorable Ms. Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, Minister of National Security and the Civil Service, and the current Chair of Caricom, the Honorable Sir Marston Gibson, Chief Justice of Barbados, the Lieutenant Colonel, the Right Honorable Jeffrey Bostic, Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honorable Ms. Cynthia Ford, Minister of People Empowerment and Other Affairs, the Honorable Ms. Sandra Husbands, Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Trade and my parliamentary representative, the Honorable Colin Jordan, Minister of Labour and Social Partnership Relations, His Excellency Ambassador David Commichon, Barbados' Ambassador to CARICOM, Professor Dr. Abdullah Hakeem Quick and Mrs. Quick, Dr. Rudolph Allen, Academic Coordinator, of the Faculty of Sport and Special Advisor to the Sports Science Society, distinguished members of the legal profession, distinguished members of the clergy, distinguished historians and academics, Maulana Ibrahim, the head Barbados Association of Muslim Theologians and the principal of the Al-Falah School, the president of the Barbados Muslim Associations, distinguished brothers and sisters in humanity here and those joining via the live stream. Good night. It is my distinct honor to welcome each and every one of you to the launch of this historic book, Muslims of CARICOM, written by Sabir Nakuda, a Muslim historian and an author who continues to spread his wings of wisdom and expertise throughout CARICOM and by extension the world. He has most definitely proven himself once again with this masterpiece. This book is the first of its kind, detailing the history of Muslims in CARICOM from the days of slavery to modern day Islam. He has left no country or stone unturned in this extensive study. It is symbolic that this launch is taking place at University of the West Indies, KFIL, which is one of the most diverse campuses in the world. I can proudly say KFIL acts as the heart of regional integration and the capital of CARICOM. This is shown where students of varying colors, cultures, and religions can all gather for one common goal and provide an infrastructure for engagement and integration. I believe if our leaders can come together similarly to how we at UWI Unite, CARICOM can certainly punch above its weight. The launch is even more unique as it was planned by the Muslim students on campus, who are all part of the Islamic Society of KFIL and constitutes the Muslims of CARICOM. The Islamic Society provides opportunities for all through our various social and spiritual programs, all aiding in the development of Barbados, and by extension, CARICOM. We commit to providing a space and an opportunity just as this privilege was given to us. Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to fasten your seatbelts as we create history here tonight. And let us come together as one united CARICOM and continue to prove ourselves on the world stage. Enjoy. Thank you.
As you may be aware, the Caribbean Community, commonly known by its acronym CARICOM, is an organization of 15 Caribbean nations and dependencies, founded on August 1st, 1973. Sabir's research for this book took him to all of the 15 of the CARICOM member states, from the smallest to the largest, via plane, boat, and if I'm not mistaken, on donkey in Haiti. He visited Haiti and he has some wonderful pictures from there. Volcano ravished Montserrat, one of the smallest countries in CARICOM, to the jungles of Belize. He traveled extensively to get his research done. We are happy this evening to have David Commichon, the Barbados ambassador to CARICOM, who was kind enough to do the preface, and we have quoted him here on the banner, and he's at the back of the book. So we are happy that he is here with us this evening. He did say he had another engagement. I am glad that he got away in time. So as many of the ministers here and the Prime Minister. So we are extremely proud and happy that you made the effort to come. David, I would like to invite you to say a few words and to address the audience tonight.
Thank you, Suleiman. Madam Prime Minister, Honorable Chief Justice, Ministers of Government, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters all. the man of the moment, Brother Sabir Nakuda. Good evening. I felt extremely privileged when Sabir Nakuda approached me about writing the preface to his book, Muslims of Caricom. He shared with me the early manuscript, so I was able to read it and to come to an appreciation of the amount of work he did, the labor of love that this book represents, and in my capacity as Barbados' ambassador to Caricom, I really welcome this work that Sabir has delivered to us. You know, some of the most insightful of our political leaders speak about the Caribbean civilization. And indeed, the Caribbean is a civilization. But I think that we are still trying to work out to determine what exactly are the cultural and psychological contours of that civilization, and what were all of the elements that went into crafting this unique Caribbean civilization. C.L.R. James used to say that somebody needs to tell the Caribbean people who they really are, because he doubted whether they really understood what a magnificent people they are, what a magnificent civilization they constitute. And he drew upon several examples, but one of the main examples was the Haitian Revolution. How could these enslaved Africans in Haiti so organize themselves as to defeat the greatest armies of Europe, the army of Napoleon that had swept all in its path in Europe, the army of Spain, the army of England? How could where did that capacity come from to organize to reap such a magnificent victory and to be the only people in the whole of human history to successfully bring to fruition a slave rebellion and constitute a free society? And that's one way of looking at it. I often ask myself, how did our people, faced with the evil and barbarity that those early slave societies were, how did they manage to resist that barbarity, to resist that evil, not to lose their intrinsic humanity, and to go on in centuries ahead to create one of the most humane civilizations that this world has known? Because let's understand it, those slave plantations were the world's first concentration camps. These islands were locations of the most extreme terroristic forms of brutality and evil. And yet, our people transcended it, keeping their humanity intact. What were all the ingredients that went into that? Well, if you read a lot of the early history books, there's no mention of Muslims. They mention all kinds of entities that played a part in those resistance and transcending struggles. But the more recent historians perhaps dig in deeper. Historians like Michael Cratton, for example, are telling us that a significant proportion of the enslaved population, the Africans who were brought across the Middle Passage, were in fact Muslims. And I really congratulate Sabir, because Sabir has tried to tell the whole story. You know, most people, when they think about Muslims in Caricom, they think about the post-emancipation period. They think about the period of the indentureship and the indentured servants coming from, the so-called indentured servants coming from India and the Pakistan area and Indonesia and so forth. But Sabir makes it plain that the first Muslims came from sub-Saharan Africa across the Middle Passage. And Michael Cratton, in his classic book, Testing the Chains, tells you that the white plantocracy were surprised to discover a significant number of literate enslaved Africans among them. And in fact, he says that before the year 1800, that the number of literate enslaved who were Muslims was just about equal to the amount who were able to learn literacy in the slave plantation. So, for example, in Barbados, we know that Nanny Gregg, who played such a role in the 1816 rebellion, was a literate slave and an enslaved person, and it was because she was literate she was able to play that role. So we have to ask ourselves, since literate enslaved persons played such a critical role in fomenting and organizing resistance, what role did those literate Muslims play? And Cratton tells us that many of those literate Muslims were able to come together across the plantation society to practice their religion, to meet in secret, to recite verses of the Quran to each other from memory. So, Sabir, you have started us on a journey that should lead us to look very deeply into the role that Muslims have played in crafting this Caribbean civilization that we should be extremely proud about. Your text, I certainly look forward to using your text in my work as ambassador to Caricom. The message is now sinking in all across the Caribbean, all across our region, our community, that more and more we really have to look to ourselves. There are no saviors out there. There's nobody out there in that international community that is really interested in us and our welfare. We have to look within for our own salvation. And in looking within, we have to identify and prize and value all of the cultural inputs that have gone into making this very unique Caribbean civilization. And we know that the religion of Islam is a religion that is characterized by personal discipline, moral guidance, spiritual insight, and an ethic, an ethos of social egalitarianism. And so when we look back at our Black resistance struggle against slavery and all forms of oppression, those values figure very prominently. And therefore, to what extent did that Islamic input, to what extent was that critical to our historical journey? Sabir, you have started us on a journey. I trust that the other academic historians, the academics from the KFL campus, and other higher institutions of learning will take up the gauntlet that you have thrown down. And once again, thank you, Sabir. You have provided me with an invaluable text that I will certainly deploy in my work as Barbados' ambassador.
Many thanks, Ambassador Comison. We go back many years and we have worked together, and thank you very much for your comments. Indeed, it leads right into what we are about to read, a small extract from the book, and we will hear from that shortly. And it leads into a quote that I used at the first launch in 2013. A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It is important that we understand where we came from, who we are, our history, our origin, our culture. And this book helps Caricom people, Caribbean people, to understand that history a little further. Sabir was deliberate in choosing the first chapter of the book to be called Islam, Africa, and the Atlantic Slave Trade. It's the first chapter of the book. And it's very important in setting what he wants for the understanding of the very long history, as you mentioned, David, of Islam and Muslims in this region. A history, as you said, that's often overlooked or put aside. This year, Prime Minister, I don't know if you remember, but this year marks 50 years of the arrival of Ra-2 to Bridgetown. 50 years. Ra-2 was a papyrus boat built by the Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl. Sabir mentions it in his book because he said he was there in 1970 when it arrived at the Careenage. And what this explorer was trying to achieve was to show that Africans were traveling between Africa and the region long before Columbus on boats made of papyrus. And he made it, and this year is 50 years. So perhaps in the city of Bridgetown, Lieutenant Colonel Bostic, we can do a little celebration in July. So Sabir mentions this. So this is a long history. So we are happy that Sabir has started this work, and we're going to bring an excerpt from the book of this chapter. I invite a young lady, Miss Aisha Clark. She's a student in the Faculty of Social Science and a member of ISOC, and she's an aspiring young spoken word artist. Aisha?
Assalamu alaikum and good evening, everybody. I'll begin by reading a little bit about Islam, Africa, and the Atlantic slave trade. So let's learn a bit about the African explorers. About 200 years prior to the invasion by Christopher Columbus, West African Muslims were undertaking transatlantic voyages with massive fleets of ships. Fadullah al-Umari recorded in his Masalik al-Absar that in 1312, the Mali Emperor Mansa Kita Abubakari II set sail from Senegambia with 2,000 ships to discover the limits of the Atlantic, heading west across the Atlantic, never to return. In his book entitled African Explorers of the New World, Harold G. Lawrence states, "We can now positively state that the Mandingos of Mali and the Songhai Empire, and possibly other Africans, crossed the Atlantic to carry on trade with the Western Hemisphere Indians and further succeeded in establishing colonies throughout the Americas." Vincentian historian Edgar Adams stated in his book, "The African presence and influence of the cultural tradition of St. Vincent and the Grenadines that he, Columbus, was informed by some Portuguese officials that African boats periodically left the Guinea coast and headed towards the lands of the West with merchandise. Based on that knowledge, Columbus changed his course to sail back to the West Indies, preferring the route followed by the African seamen. Those black African seamen were later identified as Black Guanini. It has also been suggested that the adventures of the Black Guanini seamen may have provided the first contact between the Africans and the indigenous Indians, which are the Caribs, and that the relationship may have produced the first Black Caribs of St. Vincent. Not surprisingly, the name Scaranagu, used for the racial mixture of Africans and Caribs, and Garifuna, the culture, can be traced back to the Mandinga and Islamic origins. Edgar Adams then went on to state that the early relationship between the Arawaks, Caribs, and the Africans was evidenced by the attachment which the indigenous Indians developed for the crescent symbols made of gold, silver, and copper alloys. Surprisingly also, they referred to those symbols as caracoles, which was the name of the African group who started the early gold trade to the Antilles. The Guanini were also known as the Mandinga Caragoles, or caracoles. The Atlantic slave trade. Between 1500 and 1866, approximately 15 million Africans were shipped to the Americas and the Caribbean. Over 20% perished during the long and turbulent Atlantic Sea voyage. The vast majority of slaves came from Western and Central Africa. Among them were a significant percentage of Muslims. These Muslims came from areas where Islam was present during the slave trade, such as Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Mali, Benin, Ghana, and Nigeria. Among the Muslim tribes who were enslaved were the Mandingos, Fulani, Hausa, Nago, Mina, and Wolof. Thank you very much.
We are extremely pleased and fortunate this evening to have with us here the Honorable Prime Minister, Mia Motley, who is actually the current chair of Caricom. She assumed office on the 1st of January. So the timing cannot be better, Sabir, for launching your book, that we have our Prime Minister to be here at the launch. We are extremely grateful that you took time out of your busy schedule, and I know that you have had an extremely busy schedule today. We've been up and down trying to get you here, and I'm glad that you took the time, and we are happy. And your presence here signals to us that you are committed to ensuring the upliftment and the development of Barbados for all its citizens. It is said that the true measure of a democracy is the way it treats its minorities, is the way that democracy treats its minorities. It can be confirmed that Barbados has certainly passed this test. Muslims are a minority in this country, but we have never been made to feel that way. No one has never made us feel as a minority. We are part and parcel of Barbados. And Barbados has certainly moved past simply tolerating its minorities to embracing them with a loving embrace. Your administration from the day it took office ensured and continued, and in fact improved even more on this embrace. Your attendance tonight reinforces that reality, and we are all very appreciative of your participation. And our Rastafarian brethren is here, and we know each other very well, and we work together. And I know that you are embracing the Rastafarian brethren as well. So we are welcoming this embrace. Sabir's book's launch tonight, I'm sure, will be one of those tools. The book itself will be one of those tools that you and your advisors, as David mentioned, can rely on as you chart a course and a new vision for Caricom. It will certainly help in a better understanding of the dynamic and integral minority faith in our region. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sabir, Honorable Chief Justice, Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen all. 25 years ago, as Minister of Education, Youth and Culture, I started a narrative that is as relevant today as it was then when I first referred to it. And that is that this region called the Caribbean is special because we have a story to tell to the world that the world needs to hear. That I wasn't even concerned at the time as to whether they wanted to hear it, but I knew that they needed to hear it. And it is a narrative, as I said, that is as relevant today as it was then. Perhaps one might argue, given the circumstances of the last 24 hours, even more relevant. Because we have understood as a migrant community, all of us, because regrettably, there are very, very few who were indigenous to this region who still live among us. And that we have understood as a migrant community that we needed to be able to define for ourselves first a path of survival and then a path of prospering within a land that was not initially ours, and in circumstances where those who controlled our movements had no desire for us to do more than eke out a basic existence. The capacity to carry bitterness in your heart is there within every human being. But rather than opt for bitterness, this Caribbean region has shown that it is possible to define a space for all of us that allows each of us to be able to appeal to the better aspects of our nature and to create a space where respect for the dignity of each human being is the platform from which our societies as modern civilizations ought to be built. And I say so conscious of the fact that other regions in the world have known what it is to have people vilified and marginalized and discriminated against, but they haven't necessarily with the same fervor had to make societies built or constructed of people from different backgrounds and religions and civilizations, not always acting in harmony with one another because of the power relationships. But out of that, being able to create something as glorious as we have been able to create. That does not mean that the combined elements of the Caribbean civilization do not have a responsibility for being able to tell the story of the pathways by which persons came here. Because even though we acknowledge the wholeness of the Caribbean as one, we recognize that the mechanisms or the pathways by which all of us got here are different. And we have a duty to tell those stories, first to our own, and then secondly, to the rest of the world, as an inspiration that in spite of where we have come from, we have known what it is to rise above our circumstances and to celebrate life and to respect the dignity of each other. And I start from that position because our stability as a region can be threatened by global events. And at the heart of those global events is the inability of persons of different faiths and different civilizations to be able to live together and to respect one another on land masses far larger than anything we have access to. That's what makes it so cute. And we have, therefore, a duty in this region to remind others and ourselves, because it is so easy to take for granted many things, to remind others that ours is a society that values these aspects of respect and that values tolerance as a critical part of our society. You know, many years ago, I made a statement that got me into trouble. But I say it again, that a society that has known what it is to discriminate against people for the majority of its modern existence can in no way find comfort at any time in a discrimination against any human being for any reason. And I say so because none of us has divine power. And none of us has the right to judge. None of us has the right to act inimically against one another for things that are beyond our control. And I believe, therefore, that the invitation that you extended to me was one that I had a responsibility to accept. It's not just a case of wanting to be here. But as you said just now, a society is as great as it is prepared to accept all among the society and to ensure that there is not only an absence of discrimination, but a celebration of the diversity of the society. And these are a lot of fancy words for what I know Bajan stand for. Because in every community, whether it is, you said, the first Bengali Muslims came here in 1910, of record, it may well have been before, we don't know. The Gujarati Muslims, you said 1929. But what we know is that this society is a society that at its core, don't mind all the long talk, at its core is respectful of the dignity of individuals. And Barbadians' respect for social justice stands as a beacon, as one of those attributes that this society must never lose. Fancy words for how the average Bajan puts it. Stop on fairy. Don't take advantage of. The average thing, the first thing that will come out of a Bajan's mouth is damn fear. That's the essence of who we are. Now, one might argue that it was crafted because we've had to fight for too long against unfairness and iniquity and injustice. In Ghana recently, I had cause to share research that came from this university showing that Barbados was essentially an Akan-speaking nation between 1635 and 1700. And that the first really major revolt was not 1816, but 1675, led by a man otherwise known as King Cuffy. Ironically, that the intention was to install him on the stool as King of Barbados. And I say ironically because if we were on the other side of this campus, we might well be talking from the stool that is the administrative headquarters of this Cave Hill campus now. But Sabir, I want to especially congratulate you and thank you, because the discipline of writing and the discipline of research is not one given to many. That you have not only done it once, because I had the honor of accepting your first book as leader of the opposition in my office in Parliament, but that you have done it again not just for the benefit of your home community in Barbados, but for the regional community of the Caribbean, makes us proud that you are one of our own who is leading the way yet again in the regional integration movement. And that I can speak to you both as Prime Minister of Barbados and Chairman of the Caribbean Community is even more pleasing to me. Because our region has to continue to be the conscience of the world. 1 year ago, we took a decision as heads of government, the majority of us, that the circumstances destabilizing our neighborhood had to be the subject of mature conversation. There were those who told us that the time for conversation was past, and that there was no need for conversation, only for action. Almost reminiscent as to what is happening in another part of the world. And we said no. And if we chose to be intimidated, we would have done nothing. But we left here, Prime Minister of Trinidad, Prime Minister of St. Kitts, and myself, and we met with the United Nations Secretary General, and we met with a number of other ambassadors and leaders from the rest of the world. Today, 1 year later, it became absolutely clear that our understanding and determination to stand up for principle was the correct judgment. There can be no substitute for principle. And principles will only mean something when we accept that even at its most inconvenient point in time, we must stand for principle. The story of all of us who came as migrants, even those who chose to dominate us initially, has been one that ultimately has to melt in to a pot that allows us to be able to frame, or to mold rather, a civilization that is rooted in principle and that has the capacity to remind the world of the things that ought to matter when it comes to dealing with human beings and treating people fairly. And I want, therefore, to be able to say to you that one of the things that we have not yet gotten to as a government, but I am convinced that we have a moral responsibility to undertake. And I want to thank those responsible last year for bringing persons of different faiths together as they did, to be able to show the rest of this country and the world that we can do it. I am not a Jew, but one of the most celebrated authors, in my view, is the former Jewish Chief Rabbi of London, Jonathan Sacks. And when you read The Dignity of Difference, penned by him, you begin to understand that the experience of being able to frame those universal values and to have all of the different faiths or religions come together in celebration of what is common to each of us is something that is required more than anything else in this global community in which we live on earth. And this little island must not be intimidated into silence or inaction by reason of lack of size or geography from saying and attesting what we know to be right and what we know to be true. And if we therefore can create a space where persons from different faiths and religions can come together to mold a framework from which the rest of the world can have the comfort of holding on to. Because whether it is as an adjunct to Codrington College and turning it into some kind of spiritual university, or whether it is finding some other space where Christians and Muslims and Rastafari and Hindus and Baha'i and all of the African indigenous religions can come in that space to allow people to interact and to begin to understand that irrespective of the fact that we worship different gods, we have the same two eyes. We have the same two ears. We all have a nose. We have the capacity to think. We have the capacity to speak. We have the capacity to love. We have the capacity to fight. We have the capacity to be tolerant or to discriminate. And that the essence of religion is really about carrying us to a higher purpose that ought to be rooted in good for the most part. And that whether we look at each other at the dawn, in the midday sun, in the evening, or in the dark of night, the light through which we look at each other does not change the fact that we are all human. So, I use this opportunity, Sabir, to be able to speak more broadly to the country and to say that we have a story to tell and an example to share. And the extent to which it can mushroom and blossom depends on the leadership of those here being prepared first and foremost to concretize what already happens, because you already live good with each other. We already live good with each other. But how do we move it to the next level and to the next generation? And how do we use it as a platform to be able to show the world that if it is possible in small places, then it can be possible in large places. And ours, therefore, is a mission that is very clear. So that, my friends, Barbados was the first place in the modern world that became an example of the worst aspects of racism and the racial experiment. Barbados was that place that allowed people to reinforce all of the institutional trappings to dominate people. And it became that place because it was a place where those who had and those who were subjugated lived on the same rock in a way that in many others there wasn't a living together. Now, if we understand that, then we have a duty to become that first place where we can truly say to the rest of the world that these isms and schisms that you're fighting with between religions, causing people, children, to go to war and die, or these isms and schisms that you are using to be able to discriminate and to subjugate others, ought to be a thing of the past, because when we remove all of it, we don't agree on everything, but we agree on the essence of what it is to be human, to love, to share, to raise, to procreate, to do all of the things that are necessary to sustain human life on this planet. And I believe, therefore, that if there are those of you who are willing within the faith communities of this country, that we also as a government will be willing to work with you, because the world is such a small place now that the message of love can rise from this nation as easily as the message of hate is communicated to this nation. And the only difference is the will to do it. In the same way that you have expressed the will to be able to proudly tell the story of your faith in this part of the world, I trust and pray that those who have the responsibility for other religions will recognize that we have a unique opportunity between the religious community, the government, and the people of the country to live an example that can be there as a beacon for the rest of global civilization. I thank you. I commend the book not just to the people of this country, but to the people of the Caribbean, because I am truly of the view that ours is one of the greatest civilizations in the world today, because we have learned the hard way how to live and love together to make this world a better place. Thank you.
Many, many thanks, Madam Prime Minister. We would like to present a copy of the book to the Prime Minister now, because we know she's not going to be able to stay. She has indicated that she has to go to another engagement, so we would like to do that presentation now. Sabir. We'll have the second excerpt from the book now, and we would like to invite a student here at the University of the West Indies Cable Campus from the Faculty of Social Science, Ms. Asim Abana. She will read from the chapter, a piece of the chapter on Barbados, in particular the Gujarati Muslims. Welcome.
Assalamualaikum and good evening, everyone. Unlike the East Indian Muslims who arrived to Trinidad, Guyana, and other Caricom countries as indentured laborers, the East Indian Muslims in Barbados came on their own and by accident. Bashart Ali Diwan was the first known East Indian Muslim to come to Barbados from the village of Jinpur, Hooghly district, West Bengal, around 1910. Immediately upon his arrival in Barbados, Bashart Ali started his itinerant trading business by going door to door around the countryside to sell his merchandise on a credit basis to the working class, who began to acquire many basic commodities that they otherwise could not afford, as they previously had to pay cash for them. He later began inviting his brothers and other relatives to settle in Barbados. Like the Bengalis, the Gujarati migration to Barbados was also accidental. In early 1929, Hafiz Suleiman Kasuji, Musa Patel, and Ibrahim Bulbulia from the village of Kafleta, Gujarat, boarded a ship from Mumbai to go to Brazil to cut timber. When they arrived in Brazil, they met Ismail Mahmud from their village, who had come in 1928 with other Gujaratis. The four of them decided to go to British Guyana, where they received a warm welcome by the East Indian Muslim community because Suleiman Kasuji was a Hafiz, which is a person who had memorized the Quran. In the middle of 1929, the four of them traveled to Barbados, bringing coals and coconuts, which were plentiful in Guyana. They would stay for a few days in Barbados, selling their merchandise from Suttle Street, Bridgetown. On one of their trips, they met Bengalis in Bridgetown and were very happy to see their fellow Muslims from India. Some of the Bengalis at that time were living in Swan Street and Tudor Street. The Gujaratis decided to settle in Barbados and stayed with the Bengalis in a 3-story building in Milk Market, Swan Street. The Gujaratis started their itinerant business along with the Bengalis. They would teach the Bengalis basic Islamic knowledge after work at night under the kerosene lamp, and Hafiz Suleiman Kasuji would lead in prayers. The early Gujarati Muslims, like the Bengali Muslims before them, were unable to call their wives to Barbados because of financial constraints, so they also married local Barbadian women. It was not until 1948 when the first 2 Gujarati wives came to Barbados. From the inception, East Indian Muslims continued to practice their faith by praying in their homes, and on Friday would assemble at one of the homes of a Muslim to perform their Friday congregational prayer. In 1950, a group of Muslims purchased a wooden house in Sobers Lane, Bridgetown for prayers, while another group of Muslims in the same year purchased land at Kensington New Road for the purpose of building a masjid. The purchases of both properties were done through donations. By 1951, the first masjid, known as Jummah Masjid, was completed through local donations at Kensington New Road, St. Michael. Thank you.
We are very happy to have with us, and fortunate actually, to have in our midst Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick. Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick He is in Barbados on rest and relaxation, but we dragged him out of that rest and relaxation, he and his wife, and they have chosen Barbados to spend 4 months to get away from the bitter cold in Canada. Dr. Quick is a senior historian and religious leader who has accomplished a lifetime worth of achievements spanning many continents while enlightening the lives of millions. He was born in the United States of America of African American and Bajan roots, as he puts it. He accepted Islam in Canada in 1970 and pursued his study of the Arabic language and Islam at the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia. He graduated in 1979, one of the first 2 students to do so from the West. He later completed a master's degree and a doctorate in African history at the University of Toronto in Canada. Dr. Abdullah has served as imam, teacher, counselor, and media consultant in the United States, Canada, South Africa, and the West Indies, and is still going strong. Among his achievements are Honorary Chief of the Northern Province of the Republic of Sierra Leone, West Africa, presented by Ambassador Dawuda Kamara, Honorable Minister of Interior and Local Government, Freetown, Sierra Leone, in April 2008. He has also achieved the Order of Arctic Adventurers, presented by Mayor Danny Rogers, Mayor of Inuvik, Northwest Territories of Canada in May 2011. He has also achieved the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in recognition of contributions to Canada from the Governor General of Canada in February 2013. Presently, he is a senior lecturer with the Islamic Institute of Toronto and an outreach coordinator with the Canadian Council of Imam. We welcome Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick to speak to us this evening at this launch. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent and Merciful. To the honorable ministers, to the educators, our brothers and sisters, our scholars, our children, I begin with the greeting words of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And these are the words of peace. And I pray that these few moments would be a source of peace and understanding. It is a great privilege for me to be with you here tonight, a great honor. That's for a number of reasons. One is that my grandmother, Edna Brantford Bourne, left the shores of Barbados in 1917. And she went to America with one of the early waves of Bajan women. She was a nurse dietitian. She married an African American from Virginia, and my mother and her sister were the children. My aunt, Elizabeth, was one of the first black women to receive a master's degree from Boston University in sociology. My mother received a master's degree in education. So from my female leaders and guides, I learned the importance of education. My father, an African American, served in the US military in World War II. And even though he was part of the military police, and he went to Algeria and throughout Europe, he found racism in the US military. And so he taught us to question. So these two motivations, the desire for education and the feeling of questioning information, led me to a lifelong search. It led me to leave America, to embrace Islam. And in 1973, I found myself in Saudi Arabia. And there I studied the Arabic language, and my wife Karima, who was a Jamaican Canadian, was with me. And there in Arabia, 1973, I met two Bajans, Dawood Abdul Haq, who's in the book, Muhammad Ali, may his soul rest in peace. Imagine this. This is a story. Sons of Barbados in the Arabian Peninsula in 1973, studying the Arabic language, living in the holy city of Medina and Mecca, and interacting with Muslims from all over the planet. What I learned after that 7 years of study and graduating from the university was that Arabic is not only a religious language. Arabic for many centuries carried the knowledge of science, the knowledge of history. It was one of the great lingua francas of this planet. I started to use my Arabic. And I found that in science and in math, so many words that we take for granted came from Arabic. Algebra is al-jaba. It comes directly from Arabic. Chemistry is from alchemia, or alchemy. It comes directly from Arabic. I learned also that Arabic was a source of the carrying of history. And this was important to me because as an African American with Bajan parentage, I was searching for my roots, searching for my family. Where did we come from? What was the actual story of the African continent? And I found out from studying history books that actually what we learned from the great scholars writing in the Arabic language is that Africa was not a dark continent of ignorance, but actually it was an amazing continent of education and civilization. I started to read different works. The works of Al-Mas'udi, Al-Idrisi, Ibn Qutiyya. These are Arabic famous historians read throughout the world. And I found in their writing something really strange. They were talking about journeys of Muslims who were leaving the shores of Spain, or Portugal called Andalusia, and Morocco, and traveling into the Atlantic and coming back. They also spoke about the journeys of African Muslims leaving the shores of West Africa. Long before Columbus, all of this is hundreds of years before Columbus, and returning. And so with the Arabic language, I went into the writings, followed the writings. Al-Umari, who was mentioned earlier, had his interpreter speak with Mansa Musa, the famous West African Muslim king. And for those young students who are here and love to go online, I want you to Google something after this program, not now. Who was the richest man who ever lived in history? I want you to Google this now. Not Rothschild, not Rockefeller, not the Nizam of Hyderabad. Who was it? Mansa Musa, a black African king. When he made his pilgrimage to Mecca, he carried with him 72,000 people. He crossed the Sahara Desert with 15,000 camels laden with gold. They changed the economy of every country that they reached. And when they came to Cairo, Al-Umari interviewed him and said, "Where did you get this power and authority from?" He said, "We are the kings of Mali. And my older brother Abu Bakr, Mansa Abu Bakr, went into the ocean, which is the Atlantic, with 2,000 ships and never returned." 2,000 ships left the shores. And if you look at Senegal and you see the currents that will naturally take you right into Barbados, or if you go lower, right into the Amazon, the Mandingo Muslims reached South America, went through Central America, up into the United States, and even Harvard University scholars, Leo Weiner, one of them, wrote a book called Africa and the Discovery of America, recognized that there were African people who were in this region long before the coming of the Europeans. I was shocked to find this out. I was also shocked to find that during the slavery period, that the African slaves and political prisoners who were brought to the Americas, many of them were Muslims. Right now, we estimate about 15 to 30%. And amongst these Muslims, again, Arabic was an important issue for them. And so hundreds of the works of these scholars in the Caribbean, in South America, in the United States, are now coming to the surface. I got a chance to read the writings of people in slavery in Arabic, classical Arabic language. One, Umar bin Said, talked about his whole, his life. It's an autobiography. Others spoke about their experiences, their eyewitness experiences of what was happening in slavery. In Jamaica, a document that was sent from Kingston into the countryside, a big revolt started in 1835 in the Manchester province of Jamaica. In Haiti, Bookmen, Macandal, these were the ones who initiated the revolts, and the great General Toussaint Louverture organized the rebellions. These were Muslim leaders all over the region. I was shocked and pleasantly surprised to find this. And so these writings are coming forward. And what our brother Sabir Nakuda and other historians are doing is showing that there are waves of Muslims who have come into this region. Before Columbus, during the slavery period, indentured laborers, economic migration. There were also Arabic-speaking people who lived all throughout the Caribbean, Central America, South America, who come across. And it is shocking when we bring out the true history, and I would say our story, not his story. When we bring that out, we understand there is so much that we have to give to each other. And that is so important now in this chaotic world that we are living in, where religion and race, ethnicity, for many is becoming a means of negativity. It should be a means of positivity, even if we have to agree to disagree. But we're all human beings. We're all part of the same family. We are taught that our mother and father are the same. And so in reality, all of us are cousins. And we're all part of one family. And I'm so proud of Sabir for his work, the hard labor that he put in. I understand this as a historian myself, who has traveled to many of these places, what it takes to do this. We're so proud of his work. We're so proud that this can be a contribution to bring us together, to break down barriers, right, to connect the different religions, and for our younger generation to give more light on the true history of our region and of the world. So I congratulate him and the Barbados Muslim Association. I congratulate you. It's so much of an honor for me. I feel like I'm coming home, and I'm searching for my family. My grandmother's father was Charles Bourne, and and her mother was Mary Bino. So it is the Bourne and Bino family. So Bournes and Binos, look out, because I'm coming. And I pray that this evening and others will bring us all together, and that we can establish an island of peace, an island of unity as an example to the world. I thank you for this opportunity. May Allah bless you, Sabir, and your wife, and all the work you've done. I leave you in peace. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much. As we get closer to the end of our evening's formal part, there is someone that I would normally come across in the living room of Sabir drinking tea and eating samosas when I regularly end up there. And he really needs no introduction. It's a long introduction, and it would be too long for me to read. But he's well known in Barbados. And there's one thing that I have to mention, though. He is a student of the foundation school. That's most important. The Chief Justice of Barbados, Sir Marston, gives some welcome to say a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Suleiman. One of the good things that's happened, being asked to deliver remarks after the Honorable Prime Minister, and after His Excellency, and after Professor Quick, is that I can be very short and brief. Because much of what I had planned to say has been said by them, but infinitely more eloquently than I could have done it. So the first thing I want to do is to congratulate Sabir on this excellent work. I was privileged to be presented by him with his first book, Bengal to Barbados, which I read. And I am happy to be here to attend the launching of the Muslims of Caricom. I want to tell you that, I know, and I haven't read the book yet, but I know that if it follows the path led by Bengal to Barbados, it's about celebrating our diversity, as the Prime Minister so eloquently said. But diversity requires work. It is not easy. And to some extent, I want to give or express words of warning. This book is as much a celebration of our diversity as it is a warning to us of how easy it is to slip into what I like to call othering. If you look at the world now, you see that there's what I want to call a very dangerous trend of identifying somebody as the other, or a group as the other, and then discriminating against them. Not so long ago, and I shall not name the country, I shall not even name the region, but a law was passed that said, we welcome immigrants. Muslims need not apply. Well, I don't need to mention the country. And it is interesting to note that in the major Western countries, the objects of that othering, more often than not, have been Muslims. They're being targeted and called radical Muslims, as if every Muslim or every person who ever read the Quran was radical. There's some radical Christians too. And there's some radical Jewish groups. And the reason I want to warn us, because it was not difficult 2,000 years ago to identify one who had been mentioned very honorably in the Quran, to identify him as the other and to put him up on a cross and kill him, because he had an idea which the other people didn't agree with. And it was not enough to disagree. You had to be disagreeable, and to be disagreeable, you had to use violence. And that's what we're having now. And so, Sabir, I want to congratulate you as much as to thank you for telling us that Muslims are not the other. You are part of us. And in fact, I also want to tell you that we have a numerical understanding of the idea of what a minority is. As far as I'm concerned, a minority is a group that is treated with brutality and subjugated. In the South Africa before Nelson Mandela, Africans were a majority, but they were treated like a minority. Okay? So therefore, it is not difficult to slip into that othering that is happening now. A large number of Muslims are sailing across the Mediterranean and finding themselves mistreated in Europe. We all know what happened within a few months of the election in 2016 in America. We know that it is very easy, as I said, to identify the other. And I hope and pray, Sabir, that what this book will do for us, as the Prime Minister so eloquently said, is to teach us that we can live together. And we can disagree. We can disagree. Sabir let me in on a little secret, which I really thought I should let him reveal it, but I'm going to reveal it anyway. He tells me that his next book is going to be about the Abrahamic religions. And it's something I've always been fascinated about. Because whether you call him Abraham, as the canon rector of St. David's would call him, whether you call him Avram, as my Jewish friends would call him, or whether you call him Ibrahim, as the Muslims would call him, same patriarch. Same patriarch. But yet we have managed to imprison each other, enslave each other, and kill each other in the name of religions, all started by this, or in the name of this patriarch. So I thank you for having me here, Sabir. I thank you for allowing me these few moments to express some views even if some of them are a little dark, they are dark because it's a warning that and it's a warning for all of us. Many of us who were shipped across the Middle Passage. It's a warning for us. We cannot slip into treating people as others. Whether we disagree with them, whether we like them, we can't just tolerate them. We must accept them, and we disagree with brothers. Don't forget, for those of us, again, I want to make another biblical allusion. Cain killed Abel. They were brothers. So the fact that your family does not stop us from being violent to each other. We really need to work at this diversity, but this unity in diversity. And Sabir, I look forward to reading the book. I look forward to your next book, The Abrahamic Religions, because I have a special interest in religions. I spent more than my fair share of my time reading about the history of the Christian church and the growth of my study of Roman history. And I also want to, if I may, follow Professor Quick and tell you one of the things that many of us here know about me long before they knew about me as even a lawyer, that I'm a musician. And one of the songs that I used to sing is a song by a group called Steel Pulse that was called King James Version. And the words were this year version and a King James Version. Called Out of Africa came the Garden of Eden. Okay? And we need to understand what particularly the Moors of North Africa did in civilizing Europe. That whole northern rim of the Mediterranean was civilized by the Moors, and that's the reason why we use the word alphabet. Good, and that's the reason why when I was glad to hear the professor mention Mansa Musa, because when I first read about him and walking across the Sahara with that much gold, and basically caused in some of the countries he caused inflation because there was so much money flowing into the economy, inflated the economy. So again, Sabir, congratulations. And I want to thank you again for showing us how we can live together. And I want to say to all of us that the Prime Minister is right. We can be an example and a beacon for the rest of the world as how people can live together, even if we disagree, and even if we come from different religions, because we have one common thread running through all of us. It's our humanity. Sure. And if we reach back into our humanity, we will find that we can't treat anybody as the other. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Sir Marston. Had I known you sing, I would put you on the program to say a few words. As we continue to applaud Sabir for his work and sacrifice in putting together this research, I must say that he did this all at his own expense. He would not tell you this, but he did this all at his own expense. He traveled to 15 Caribbean countries at his own expense. And so we owe him a debt of gratitude for what he has done in bringing this research to us. And to help us applaud Sabir tonight, I would like to invite Lieutenant Colonel, the Honorable Jeffrey Bostic, Minister of Health and Wellness, and he represents a constituency that has many Muslims in it. But he will say a few brief remarks.
From Bengal to Barbados, now Muslims of Caricom. Yes, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I had the pleasure, and they call it a pleasure, of spending the first 22 years of my life in Bridgetown, 12 in Chapman Lane proper, and 10 on Kensington Road. And I say that to say that experience allowed me to interact and integrate with Vincies, Lucians, as we would call them, Dominicans, Haitians, and Indo-Bajans. I played with Indo-Bajans, cricket and table tennis. Of course, I was a champion. I went to school with Indo-Bajans, and we also formed part of a community that allowed us at the Emerton Center to be able to interact. And funny enough, growing up, if you visited the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, you would recognize that most of the accents were Indian back in the early days. And I'm so happy to see that several years afterwards, if you blindfolded yourself and you heard Solomon and some of the younger Bajans or Indo-Bajans, you would not even know where they originated from. And that is, in my view, testimony of the level of integration that has taken place over the 100 years from Bengal to Barbados. I really count it a privilege, and I congratulate the community, first of all, for all of the work that the community has been doing in this country. And I congratulate you, Sabir, on your effort back then with the first book. And I'm looking forward to reading the second book. It is interesting that you have chosen to do this in 2020 as we are celebrating the gathering. And I was indeed very happy to see on the 30th of November, Ambassador, you already had the Caricom contingent participating in the We Barbados Parade. And I did see representatives from the Muslim community, which I thought was really very, very good. And I think we have to take it a step further this year. As November approaches, which is the regathering for St. Michael, I am planning an event which I'm going to call Those Who Came, that would facilitate the participation in a large way of all those persons who would have come from some of the countries that I just mentioned, and including your community, to be able to bring all of the cultures together and for us to really demonstrate that several nationalities came together to make this country the great country that it is. So you've played a very significant part in that. And so on behalf of my colleague, Minister, I would just like to thank you sincerely for the effort you've put into this second book. The fact that you've been able to visit 15 Caricom countries, I think is really outstanding. I think I have been able to visit about 12, so you've done better than I have been able to do. And I want to say thank you, and also congratulations to your wife who would have supported you in this venture. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Bostic. So we now hear from the man of the moment, Sabir, who is here. His daughter will introduce him and give a tribute to him. Salima, where are you? So we invite her, and then we get Sabir to come up and say a few words, and we will hopefully bring the program to an end.
Assalamu alaikum, and good evening to our specially invited guests. I have the pleasure of introducing our author, Mrs. Sabir Nakuda, my dad, to you. For those of you who may not know who I am the youngest daughter. My dad migrated to Barbados from India at the age of 10. Barbados is still considered to be his home sweet home. He attended the Wesley Hall Junior School, the Modern High School, and the Seventh-day Adventist School. After school days, he became a salesman, or coolie man as we know, before landing a job at the Barbados Advocate in the marketing department. Mr. Nakuda has been actively involved as a historian and researcher, as we've heard throughout the night. He has extensively traveled the Caribbean region and other parts of the world. While he is a world traveler, he does not enjoy the winter and boasts and shows off taking photos from his balcony of our beautiful blue waters and golden sunsets to show to our family in Canada who's now suffering in the winter. For anyone who is come into contact with my dad, we know he loves to have a quick chat, which usually turns into a 30 or 45-minute conversation or more, where he has the opportunity to secretly pass a life lesson or his words of wisdom. He has spoken extensively across the region and globally on issues of faith, culture, and his Indian background. He loves to brag about being a Bajan and an East Indian Muslim. In his first book, Bengal to Barbados, it was revealed that East Indians never intended to come to Barbados. My dad is for sure a family man with a loving and supporting wife, 4 children, and 4 grandchildren, whom he absolutely adores and loves to spoil. Growing up, my siblings and I can all relate. We never had our own identities. We were always known as Mr. Nakuda's children. My dad is an influential light, and his work closes a door against race, color, and creed, uniting people in his own unique way. With that said, I give to you the author of Muslims of Caricom, my dad, Mr. Sabir Nakuda.
Thank you so much, my daughter. I wanted to say my sweet daughter, but then I would have to say one of my sweet daughters. Because then the other one might get angry and get jealous, you know. And they live with me, so you know I have to be careful. Let me begin with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum. Honorable Sir Parson Gibson, Chief Justice, my good friend. Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests. It is a great pleasure to have each and every one of you here attending my book launch. I also want to thank God Almighty for giving me the courage and the strength to really do this work, because I realize that no one has really ventured to do this work. I know there are people who usually want to write, so Trinidadians will write about the history of the nation, mostly indentureship, but not at the level that I have written this book. So I do hope that those who purchase the book would read it, and probably those my historian friends, see if they can add more to what I have written. I want to thank my family, my wife. I want to thank also my historian friends in Barbados, because they have been helping me. Of course, I want to thank my friend Suleiman. And you know, he always confusing me about payment, you know. And I always tell him that, you know, the payments will come in the hereafter. You know, it doesn't always have to be monetary payment, you know. I pray for him, and maybe he will get the payments when he needed the most in the hereafter. I have gone to 15 CARICOM countries, and I have met some of those. I went maybe 2 or 3 times. I have also traveled to India, because the indentured East Indian came from various parts of India, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, and so on. I also went to North America, and I also went to Canada, again, to learn more. I have read about 75 books on this subject matter. I have interviewed about 300 people. For me, I think that speaking to people, doing oral research, seems to be the thing that I love to do. Because not only do I learn about the different aspects of the life of the individual or the ancestors of these particular people, but I learn more about the person I'm interviewing. And so I build relationship, and there's always this bond between the individual, someone from Barbados talking to someone in Tamil Nadu, or someone in Belize or in Montserrat, and it was such a fantastic experience. And I think that I thrive that type of experiences. And most of my work, I know Bengal to Barbados was about 95% oral research, and this one will be over 65% oral research. There are so many information that is not written, or that you cannot find in any library, or you will find in any archives or any museum. You have to go and speak to people. And the attitude and the behavior of the individual You know, it's so fascinating, so fantastic. You learn so much about the individual, you learn so much about the village in which they live, you know. And for example, I was in Jamaica, and I always like to find out, especially those who revert to Islam, because we don't say you convert to Islam, because we believe that in Islam, we believe that every child is born in a natural fitra, natural state, born as one who submits to the will of God. It is when that individual born into a Hindu family or a Christian family or whatever, then that person becomes a Hindu or a Christian, according to the family in which that individual is born. So I always like to ask, what made you, convert to Islam? And then you get so many different stories, so fascinating. Every individual have his or her own story to tell. But I thought I would give you one to show you that doing oral research is so important. So I was in Jamaica. I went to speak to this brother who is over 45 years old. So I said, hey man, brother, assalamu alaikum. What made you become a Muslim? He said, well, one day I was in the minibus and the minibus broke down. And so I walked to the gas station, and there in the corner at the gas station, I saw someone prostrating and going into sijda, ruku, and kneeling down, bowing down, and so on. So I waited, and then when he finished, I asked him, what were you doing? He said, well, I am a Muslim and I was praying. Young, my grandmother used to pray like that. So when I asked her, I used to ask her, what are you doing? And she would say, I'm praying. And I would say, well, where did you learn that? And then she would say, oh, my mother taught me. And so then, he told me, I realized that my ancestors who were slaves that were brought from Africa were Muslims. And so therefore, it is time for me, he was telling me, for me to go back to my ancestral religion, which is Islam. And so that story I will never get from a library. So these are the type of stories that you would get when you are doing oral research. I think people have said so many nice things, so there is nothing much for me to say except to thank each and every one of you for coming here. And I do hope that this coming here was enlightening, informative, educational, and I'm sure that it will even be more educational after you read the book, Muslims of Caricom. Once again, I wish each and every one of you a very peaceful 2020, and thank you so much for coming. That's what I said. That's why I said that they will be more educated if they, read the book. So you can't read the book without buying. Thank you so much.